The objection to miracles didn't actually begin with science. David Hume, following the ideas of some earlier sort of more radical deists, David Hume argued a priori, we don't believe in miracles because uniform human experience predisposes us not to believe in them. He says we don't have any really strong eyewitness testimony for miracles, so when somebody testifies about miracles, then we can dismiss that testimony. Basically, that's how his argument works. It's quite a circular argument because, you know, it presumes uniform human experience when, in fact, human experience is not so uniform that you don't have people testifying of miracles, but he dismisses them because he says uniform human experience rules them out. That was not a scientific argument. He bases it on his idea of uniform human experience. He speaks of that in terms of natural law. But the thinkers who were advancing natural law in the sciences, like Isaac Newton and his early followers, they believed in biblical miracles. They said God is the legislator who's not subject to these laws that he ordains. He is not bound by these laws. It's also problematic because in the Bible, most miracles don't fit his definition of violating natural law. I mean, in Exodus chapter 14, when God sends a strong east wind and blows the sea back all night, the parting of the sea, God uses natural means. And yet, for that to happen, right when the Israelites need it to happen, that's not a coincidence, that's not an accident. And so, you know, there's some miracles in the Bible that just cannot be explained in those terms. I mean, the virgin birth, I think, obviously Jesus' resurrection with a new glorified body, the creation of the world to begin with. But many of the miracles that God does use things within nature and just do them in a somewhat different way. Not always, but often. So Hume's argument, which he actually specifically framed against latitudinarian Anglican apologists at that time, doesn't even address most biblical miracles. And then his claim about uniform human experience, even in Hume's own day, you know, the way Hume gets around miracle claims in his day, he says, well, none of the ones from other cultures count. Because he says anybody outside modern Western white culture is ignorant and barbarous. Takes that straight from deists. It's a very ethnocentric, basically racist argument. But Hume was racist anyway. I mean, he supported the slave trade. He was very much against Africans and just against a lot of, you know, he thought all great things in all civilizations came from white civilizations. Didn't pay attention to Chinese, Indian, African civilizations and civilizations here in the Western Hemisphere that had not been influenced by Spain or Portugal or England or so on. There was a major incident that he actually cites from France, where there was the niece of Blaise Pascal. She had a running eyesore that emitted a foul odor, and it was an organic problem. Everybody knew about it. People could smell it. She was touched with what she thought was a holy thorn from Jesus' crown of thorns. Now, I don't think that's what it really was, but it was a contact point for her faith. She was instantly, publicly, visibly healed in the sight of many witnesses. The Queen Mother of France sent her own physician to check it out. What was Hume's response to this? Hume said, well, this is better documented than any miracle in the Bible, better documented than any other, you know, miracle of antiquity. And we know this didn't happen, so why would we believe the rest? That was his argument. He simply dismissed it, and he could get away with it because, most of his hearers didn't like, this happened in a Jansenist monastery. They didn't like Jansenists. Catholics didn't like them because they weren't, the Jesuits didn't like them in France, and they controlled the Catholic Church there at that time, and the Protestants didn't like them because they were too Catholic. There were two Augustinians for the Catholic and too Catholic for the Protestants. So everybody didn't like them, and so they just explained it away. And that was Hume's approach. Most people today who simply presuppose that miracles don't happen base that on the assumption, well, Hume proved this a long time ago. But you actually go back and read his essay and you think about it, it's utterly circular. Today, the question as to whether we have credible eyewitnesses or whether human experience is uniform on the question. Today, there was a major survey done of Pentecostals and Charismatics in 10 countries. And in those 10 countries alone, I think Brazil may have been one of them, I'm not sure, but in those 10 countries alone, among Pentecostals and Charismatics alone, about 200 million people claim to have witnessed or experienced divine healing. Now, if you don't like Pentecostals or Charismatics, it so happens that the survey also questioned other people, other Christians who were not Pentecostal or Charismatic. And somewhere around 39% of them had witnessed divine healing. So we're talking about hundreds of millions of people. Now, nobody would say that every one of those is necessarily a miracle, or even could only, and certainly nobody would say that they could only be explained as a miracle. But you can't start with a premise about uniform human experience when you have hundreds of millions of counter examples that you haven't even begun to look into. You haven't even explored any of them. Some of them we have medical documentation, and some of them are things like raisings from the dead and so on in response to prayer. And you also have in China, where something like around the year 2000, from within the China Christian Council, which was associated with the Three Self Church, the estimate was something like 50% of all new conversions in the previous 20 years were due to what they called faith healing experiences. Within the house churches, the estimate was far higher than that. In Nepal, they estimate like 80% of all new conversions to Christianity are due to healings and deliverance from demons. So we're talking not just about people, and neither of these, by the way, were in the 10 countries in the earlier survey. We're talking not just about people who start with Christian premises, but people who started with non-Christian premises, who became Christian precisely because they witnessed something that was so out of ordinary recoveries, that was so extraordinary, that they were willing to abandon centuries of tradition to become followers of Jesus. And some of these were in other religions or other cultures where they had their own indigenous forms of healing by other means, but it was so dramatic what God did in the name of Jesus that they were converted through this. So all that to say, is it credible to believe in miracles in an age of science? My response would be, if science means that we're willing to go where the evidence leads us, maybe we should start thinking more clearly about, let's listen to these accounts of miracles. It's not to say all of them are, but let's be open to the ones that are.